This is Module 2 of URC Reviewer Training, Review Criteria. These are the criteria for evaluation for the University Research Council grants mechanism. So you'll see them all listed here, but you also will see them replicated in rubric form in the InfoReady system. And applicants also get this list of review criteria right on the description page of the grant, so they know how they are going to be evaluated. The first item of the review criteria is the significance of the project. Applicants need to explain the merit and significance of their project for any type of person to understand and appreciate. So the significance, we're using the significance broadly, right? Like it can be of academic significance, it could be of national significance, it could be instructionally or pedagogically significant. They need to make that case. And again, anyone should be able to understand and realize the significance of this project regardless of their field. The conceptualization of their project means how well they have thought out their project and how well they have presented that in the proposal. Do they have solid research questions? Do they have realistic goals and aims? Does their methodology seem to line up with the type of project that they are proposing? And have they thought through what some of the outcomes are going to be, and have they articulated that in a really clear and concise way? Qualifications of the applicant can be assessed in a couple of ways. Applicants are required to submit a brief CV with their application, and they have the option to include any co-applicant CVs that they may have as well. And they're also supposed to address the personnel of the project in their project proposal and their proposal narrative. So you should be able to assess whether or not the applicant and the research team are well positioned to follow through with the project. Logistics, have they laid the groundwork? Have they contacted who they need to contact ahead of time? Are they going to have access to the space that they need to have access to? Have they gotten quotes for any sort of large materials and supplies or equipment? And have they thought through a good, solid timeline? Is this actually feasible within the time that they have provided? The budget. So we get lots of questions on reviewing about the budget, and I'll actually talk a little bit more on the next slide, next couple of slides, about allowable and unallowable costs. But essentially, you are evaluating the budget on whether or not they have included things that are allowed to be included on their budget, whether or not their budget is reasonable to the extent that it reflects items that seem to make sense for the project that they've proposed. Have they justified what they need? Like, do they explain why they need to travel if they've included travel? Does the travel show up in the project narrative itself? Can you align the budget with the narrative, the proposal narrative, and the budget justification? And did they do a good job justifying why they need everything in that budget, and if it's appropriate for the project that they've described to the best of your ability? And then this potential for additional support from external sources. This is dependent on your review panel, and probably also depending on the pool of applications that you're reviewing each semester. So we include this as a review criteria because the URC grants are funded by returned F&A dollars to the institution. So to the best of our ability, we would like to have this project be a self-sustaining project or a self-sustaining program rather. So ultimately, these URC grants, are laying the foundation for a faculty member to then progress and use either the data from this pilot study or the experience that they get from writing this grant and doing this project to move on to seeking external funding. And that's part of the reason why we expect, after they've received 2 URC grants, that they show evidence of attempting to seek external funding, because that sort of goes along with the spirit of trying to keep this program self-sustaining. Now, on the other hand, there are going to be some applications and some projects that you will review that have no need to seek external funding. All they need is a maximum of this $5,000, and their project can be complete, and they have made a big contribution to their field and to their discipline, and to their professional careers, and they're not going to need to seek external funding. So you may still want to choose to fund them, even if they don't have potential for additional support from an external funding source, and that's okay. So again, this review criteria is really at the discretion of your panel onto how heavily you want to weight that, and just make sure that you reflect that weight or not weight in the scores appropriately, and in your ultimate panel final funding recommendations. And then there is a last box on your review criteria screen, on your review rubric screen in InfoReady, that will ask you to provide additional comments for the applicant. This is also where you're going to give an overall review rating on the proposal as a whole, and giving any additional comments that you may want to consider, not only for the applicant, but for informing your final review discussions that you will have as a panel before you make your final funding recommendations. So now let's talk a little bit more in depth about allowable costs and unallowable costs. So any research supplies that folks will need to support their projects, this can be consumables like for lab experiments. This could be resources that you need to put something together. So like an art project. It could be resources that you need to complete a project of any kind. So it could be any sort of materials and supplies, including art supplies for those in the creative fields, or recording equipment if that's not readily available and already provided by the institution, if that's justified. It could be something like software if they need software, that sort of thing. Travel for the purposes of collecting data and collaborating with folks is allowed. We need solid justifications for these travel requests, especially since during COVID, online collaboration has skyrocketed. So funding travel needs to be really well justified in the proposal. So making sure that you're keeping an eye on that. They can pay student research assistants. These can be undergraduate students or graduate students, and they can hire multiple if their budgets allow. And then on occasion, we can pay external consultants and collaborators like translators, for example, or transcription services if they need to, if the proposal does a good job of explaining and justifying why we need to pay external personnel, and why we need to do that for the success of the project. On the other hand, there are some things that are expressly unallowable, and you'll need to keep your eye out for things. We do take a look at budgets from a technical review standpoint internally before they even go to you. So we try to catch these things before they get to you, but it is really important that you look at them and you understand what's allowed and what's not allowed, so that you're prepared when reviewing budgets to evaluate that budget, to understand if it's reasonable and allowable within the scope of URC. So we never provide funding for conference support or for dissemination of research results. So that's sort of the first and last bullet point on these slides, on this slide. We get these requests a lot, and we just can't fund folks to disseminate the research at this time. These can be purely instructional projects or purely student-driven projects. URC grants have to be faculty projects, and they could be supported by students, and they could be including students, and we encourage that, but it can't be purely student-led projects that we're funding here. We can't pay anybody who already works full-time at the university. So faculty or staff salaries and honoraria are not allowed. And we also can't pay for any food or drink or any other entertainment expenses. Even if it is a part of like a focus group situation, we just can't use the funds for that, or events. We also can't buy anything that the university may already have access to in terms of materials and supplies or computer equipment. So like cameras or recording devices, desktop computers, usually those are expected to be provided by the institution just as a matter of equipment that's required to make the university run, and grants. The URC grants are not designed to fund those types of resources. So folks just need to show evidence of having determined that they cannot get access to these things anywhere on campus, and if they need certain technology that will support this project or other research specifically, they need to well justify it in their proposal.